Welcome back to another episode of The Top Step. My name is Rowland-Smith. Now, I didn't need my coffee for this episode. You've seen this guy on MLB Network running through walls in the middle of a live show or riding cardboard down the hill at the Little League World Series. Yes, it's the one and only Eric Byrnes. Now, I started this podcast and called it The Top Step because some of my favorite memories in the big leagues was standing on the top step of the dugout with teammates hearing their story and being inspired by their journey. And for Byrnesy, he has dealt with all the ups and downs of playing Major League Baseball. And we discussed the crucial turning points that happen along the way to make him who he is today. Also that feeling when you know it's the last time you'll ever wear a Major League uniform and making that tough transition into whatever's next. For Byrnesy, he was just getting started. After hanging him up, he went on to become a polarizing figure on every major sports network, to breaking a golf world record, completing a triathlon that started in San Francisco and finished in New York City. Yes, that's right. I had to know how he had enough hours in the day to fit all this in, where all that energy comes from, and also wanted him to relive one of the funniest things I ever witnessed, when he was an inch away from bulldozing our GM on his bike after a game ripping out of T-Mobile Park. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, be sure to press the subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode is also available on YouTube. There is a link below down in the notes. Now, I hope you're ready for this episode. No coffee is required as Eric Byrnes joins me on The Top Step.
No matter what happens, Rowland-Smith has something to tell his grandkids right here.
Here comes the 1-2 pitch to Junior now. The breaking ball. He struck him out. Yeah, that will be a story for the rest of his life as he strikes out Ken Griffey Jr. and the inning is over.
Byrnesy, how we doing, buddy?
All good, man. I miss you, mate.
I know, dude. Now, I got to ask you especially, right? I've been checking out your Twitter and how's the isolation going? Because you guys are in complete lockdown, right?
Yeah, dude, it's interesting. Obviously, this is one of those things that I think, we're in unprecedented territory for everybody right now around the world. So I think there's an adjustment period for each and every one of us getting used to the new norm.
Yeah.
I would say the one thing that I've noticed early on, dude, is that like life slowed down, and it's not necessarily even that I'm less active than I used to be, but it's just that like everything from the time that I take my head off the pillow at 4 or 5 in the morning till the time I put it back on the pillow at night. It's just, I feel like in a lot of ways that I've been able to get in touch and in tune with the family, with everything going on in my world. I feel like at times I've been a freaking chicken with his head cut off, running around, from Lake Tahoe to Half Moon Bay to New York City to Arizona. And it's just like one thing after another. Yeah. And I think just being in one spot has been able to just kind of really ground me in a sense. But it's been quite the experience.
For sure. Now, look, I want to lighten the mood, dude. It's not often I get a chance to have Eric Byrnes chatting one-on-one here. So I want to lighten the mood. I got to tell you a story and hopefully remember this, right? It was in your last year, 2010, when you and I were playing together. And this is one of my favorite stories of all time. It's insignificant, anything to do with my career or any amazing moment on the field. So you would ride your bike to the stadium, right? In Seattle, right? And so one of your last days, I don't even know, it may have been your last day in a Mariners uniform, maybe because of what happened. So where all the family kind of hangs out outside the locker room. You got that tunnel underneath the stadium where everyone kind of hangs. You would come buzzing around the corner on your bike, right? And this is not your super triathlon bike or anything like that. This is I think it's like a fixie or something. It may have been like bright orange. I'm trying to remember, but I tell this story all the time. So you'd come flying out of there and then through the parking lot and see you later. I never forget. I walk out to see my wife's there, and we're standing right there. And then you come buzzing around. Well, right around this little blind corner, it was Jack Zarenzik and his slew of people just kind of standing. I could see it in slow motion. I'm like, man, he's going to take him out on this bike. I don't know if you remember this or not. You come buzzing past, and Jack Zarenzik's one of these guys that, socially it can get kind of awkward, especially we were losing a ton of games that year. You come flying past, nearly take him out, miss him by like an inch. And then you just hear this, sorry, bro, as you go around the corner. Dude, I swear, man, I've told that story. I don't know if you remember that or not. It was, and I don't know if I tell it like that was your last day, like that was it. But I don't know if it was your last day or not. But dude, classic story, mate. Do you remember that or not?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, the story's been told. I love that you were there to witness it, but the story's been told and embellished, through the years. But basically, what happened was I missed the squeeze play with Ichiro on third base, and it was we were going through a really tough first month of the season. Yeah. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't playing much either. But basically, I missed the squeeze play. I'm all pissed off. The game ends. I shoot on out of there. And I didn't even think about the media, or I obviously wasn't thinking about Jack Zarenzik at the time or anything else. It was just sort of a frustrating time. But yeah, I rode my bike to the park every single day, and all I wanted to do, I'm like, screw it, I just want to get home. And I had a newborn at the time, and really just kind of wanted to go hammer the pedals and blow off some steam. And sure enough, when I fired out of the locker room, there was just a ton of media waiting for me, and apparently Jack Zarenzik was waiting there as well. I had no clue that Jack was even there. I saw the media, and I'm just like, whatever. Like they don't give a shit enough to I missed the gosh dang squeeze. Like it was, what do you want me to do? Yeah. I mean, I didn't feel like it needed like this big explanation, or I was like, I also wasn't trying to duck anything either. I obviously was never afraid to talk to anybody, but so anyway, it was 2 days later, dude. 2
days later, I got it. That's it.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think it was like Friday night. It might have been Saturday, and then the next day, or the day after, I ended up getting called into Don Wakamatsu's office, and waiting inside was Don and Jack, and like they didn't have to say anything. Writing was on the wall, and I knew I was getting released, and I actually went up to him. I told him, I'm like, hey guys, I said, right when I walked in the room, I said, it's gonna be the easiest release you ever had. I apologize for not playing up to my potential. I said, it's been disappointing so far. And, I said, I just want to, thank you guys for the opportunity to try to revitalize my career. Cause I'd been hurt for the 2 previous years before that. I tore my hamstring, shattered a hand, whatever. And so Jack, as a matter of fact, said, Byrnesy, look, I know you can still play. We still have a lot of belief in you. He's like, we just got to make a move right now and whatever. And so he asked me, he's like, hey, do you want me to call any other teams on your behalf? And before I can even answer the question, Don Wakamatsu kind of interjected. He's like, hey, man, he goes, can I tell you something? I'm like, yeah, what's up? He goes, in all my years of being around this game, he said, never in my life have I ever seen anybody play as hard as you. Wow. And I turned back to Jack. I'm like, you know what, Jack? I'm good. And
really?
That was, how like they talk about Ted Williams, and Ted Williams, they said like basically, someone asked, down the road, like, who is that? And they said, all I want anyone to say is, there's Ted Williams, the greatest hitter that ever lived. Well, in my case, it was like, that was my Ted Williams moment. That was verification of, what, like, I wasn't the best player. I had a lot of ups and downs, but I gave that game everything I had, and I laid it on the field each and every fucking time I took it. And
so at that point,
I was done.
So you were done. So you knew there wasn't any like couple of weeks of trying to pursue another team, because I want to talk to you about your transition, right? Obviously, you've nailed it in the transition. It can be hard, dude, for players. Doesn't matter if you're a superstar, especially the 98% of guys who try and figure out what the hell do I do when I'm done playing, right? And you had some opportunities and everything else, but I think guys really struggle with their identity. They also, struggle with the fact that they're never going to have that platform to compete at that level. They've been doing it for so long. So was there any of those moments after that? You said you were done, but was there that period where you felt like, man, I'm, not depressed, but you feel like you're missing something?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I knew I was going to go through that. And you have to understand that no matter what, if you go from doing something at the absolute highest level you could ever possibly dream of, not, on top of that, all we've ever known was playing baseball. That was almost 30 years of playing the game. Right. And then it's done. So the thing is that early in my career, I let baseball define me, and I poured my heart, soul, and unfortunately self-worth into the game. And so I would judge myself on whether or not I was 4 for 4 or 0 for 4. Right. Like it's just like I was bringing it home with me.
Up until what point? Up until what point was that?
You know what? I think until what happened was this. In 2005, I got traded from the Oakland A's to the Colorado Rockies. And then 2 weeks later, I got traded to the Baltimore Orioles. And then 2 months later, I got released. And at that point, Carl Keel, who wrote The Mental Game of Baseball with Harvey Dorfman, called me up, and he worked for the Oakland A's for a long time, managed in the big leagues for a little bit. He was basically a mental strength coach, like one of the, originals, one of the just absolute freaking gangsters in the world of sports psychology. And Carl and I always had a good relationship when I was with the A's and he was there. And he's like, hey, man, he goes, I want to meet with you. I'm like, yeah, sure. So we meet at like a Caro's on Scottsdale Road. And basically he goes, here, and he hands me a napkin. And he goes, on this side, I want you to write down everything you can control. And on this side, I want you to write down everything you can't control. And so basically it came down to this. It was like things I can control: attitude, effort, preparation. That's it. Everything else was on the other side. Weather, umpires, trades, teams, releases, competition, weather. Like, it does not matter. Like, it was everything except for attitude, effort, preparation, and execution. And so when I kind of got into that mode, it's like, I could do everything right on a baseball field. And some days I just, for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And I used to let the lack of success eat at me. Yeah. And I did, because especially when I got traded from the A's, I tried so hard when I was with the Rockies, and I tried so hard when I was with the Orioles, trying to impress my new teammates and trying to, basically, throw up the double middle finger to the A's and say, oh, you shouldn't have traded me. And it's just like, when you do all of that, it's the classic case of trying too hard. And when I was able to let go of that and sort of take this mentality of like, hey, you know what? I love this game, but I'm no longer going to let all these outside influences and circumstances define who I am or what I do. And so at that point, that's when I really let go. And ironically, I signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks, had by far and away my 2 best years, and stayed in the game for, a lot longer, because at that point, I mean, it could have ended right then. But also, Brian, what happened was, when you get traded and then you get released and you're looking at you're in the outside looking in, that's when, in my mind, I'm like, hey, this is going to come to an end. I'm not going to play baseball forever. And so I started to dabble into the media stuff and dabble into, I did some work for ESPN Radio. I did some stuff for Fox. I started going home and doing some local stuff for KNBR in San Francisco, a radio station. And so when I started kind of getting into that, I'm like, this could be the transition. But yeah, there's still, no matter what, always going to be that void, because even with that, and even when I got done, there was that physical missing, right? The thing that was physically missing, that we all go through. So,
you mentioned some mental skills coaches and stuff. Look, I've had a bunch of them. Some are good. Some are just like the most cliche things that really don't matter. What are some things, man? I'm putting you on the spot here, but what are some things? I just thought of this. That advice you've been given from mental skills coach, whether they've done it, they've played in the big leagues or on that kind of stage at any level, or whether they just have obviously academic background. What are some things that you're just like, that has no bearing on what I think about or what I'm doing to play at this level? Because I feel like there's the cliches out there and everything. I've run into so many little things that have no bearing on anything when it comes down to that 15 seconds before I have to throw that pitch. To this dude who just crushes balls. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, to try to be objective in the way you look at everything, because, when I was very much like you, right? And especially back then, like I would hear things and people would tell me things. Yeah. And I'd be like, dude, shut the fuck up. What do you know? Right? Like, leave me alone. Right? It's not. And then I think as I got a little bit older, I was more receptive to it. I do think there's something to be said for having this arrogance about you, for having a confidence that is, I don't care who you are or what you're trying to tell me. Yeah. Like, look, dude, I'm here. Do you know where I'm going? I'm going to the gosh damn big leagues. Get out of my way.
Gotcha.
That's how I was all the way coming up. And it didn't matter who you were or what you were saying. Now, I listened and I tried to take in whatever, but if I had a dude telling me, whether it was a hitting coach or a mental skills coach, or it didn't matter who it was, if I liked it, I'd apply it. If I didn't, I would shut it out. As I've gotten into even studying this stuff myself, as a matter of fact, I'm a MPM certified mental performance mastery coach by the great Brian Kane. And I went through his program, and I really did it not necessarily to train athletes in it. I did it for myself. I did it to help me be a better broadcaster, to help me be a better father in dealing with my children as they now have come up, and I got an 8, 9, and 10-year-old that are ski racing at a gnarly level right now.
I've noticed, man. I've on your Twitter, I'm all over it. Wow.
It's super cool. But awesome. Even this early, it's already to learn some of these things. And again, it's just, it hasn't changed that much where it's like, I tell my kids, take in what works for you. What are your triggers? Where do you want to go? Do you do better when you're fired up and you're super excited? Like, I couldn't get, I'm already going to be fired up. So I had to find my zen. I had to find my, right? Where everyone else, some people maybe needed to get up.
Oh yeah.
I needed to try to slow down.
Gotcha.
So there's just different ways to look at it. So I think everyone, every individual is different. And I think there's things that will be very effective for one person and not the other. And I think the key to that is, and this is where I think ultimately we'll see this go in the big leagues. And I've even championed it. I've actually talked to a couple clubs about it, but I'm actually more in the camp of like, the future is mental performance teams. It's not a person. The future is somebody like you coming together with somebody like me, and coming together with somebody like Cliff Floyd, and then coming together with somebody like Carlos Pena, and that's our team. And now we're going to take care of the Seattle Mariners. Do you understand?
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like,
for sure.
What the fuck am I going to tell a left-handed pitcher that's giving up the ass, right?
Right.
And the kid happens to be from Australia too, and it's like there's certain shit that I can't relate to him with.
Absolutely.
Whereas like these other guys, they can.
Yeah, you're right. And then there's sometimes, like I look at you, obviously, I look up to you, obviously, from the broadcasting and the way you do things and operate. But I'm like, man, I just can't. Like I used to have pitching coaches, doing their best, say, look, man, hey, have you seen John Lester throw that cutter? You have to start trying to. I'm like, I'll never be able to throw that cutter on the hands of anyone like that. What is the point? We're going through scouting reports talking about Cliff Lee was a teammate when we were teammates. He's like, well, Cliff did this. I'm like, dude, I got no shot. Hey, I want to ask you something. You mentioned, before I forget here, you mentioned, and this is something I wanted to talk to you about, with who you are and your identity online and everything else. You mentioned when you got traded to the Rockies and then the Orioles, and then you're off to the Rockies Orioles around that time. Yeah. You mentioned you wanted to. I feel like you were alluding to the fact that you cared what people thought about you, in a sense. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. I get the idea when I watch you do your thing, and your whole brand is basically, it looks like you don't care what anyone thinks. You just, you're riding cardboard down a hill. You know what I'm saying? Which is so hard for people to do. I can't do that, man. It's one thing that really stops me is I'm so worried what people think. Do you feel like you got to a point where around that time when you were playing or whatever it was that you just like, screw this, man, I could care less what anyone thinks about me?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of grew up that way, and I think what happens is you develop that mentality when you've been the Lone Ranger before, you've been the guy that's been riding solo, and when I was a kid, I had to fight my way through school and sports because I was always playing up, and so I always had to play with the bigger kids and the older kids, and it was one of those things where I was never a mean kid either, right? I was always nice. And that's, I got 2 rules in my house. Number 1, no whiners. Number 2, be kind. And so I was never a jerk, but like I even tell my kids, like, if you flicked my ear, I was going to turn around and punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw injustices happening, whether it was with me or friends or anything else, I was always the first one to stand up and always the first one to say, hey, look, like, I am going to do my thing. I am going to fight for what I believe in. I am not going to let, somebody else dictate the things that I'm going to do in my life. My harshest critic was myself. So, I knew that, even when I was a kid, that I loved being me. I loved just not being afraid to be who I am and say and do some of the things. And when you put yourself out there, whether it's when you're a kid, right?
Yeah.
Like I had to deal with all the cool kids. The cool kids, this and this and this and that. And it's just like, no, they fuck them. Like I didn't care. And so, when I got it, I went to UCLA and then I got in the pro ball. It's just everywhere I went, I had to deal with. I'll give you a great story. So basically you asked where it like really started in the development of my adult life. Mm-hmm. So my first year of pro ball, I get drafted, go to Medford, Oregon. I rake there, called up to Visalia, rake there, go to instructional league, do well. Next thing you know, I start with the AAA team in spring training. Now, you know how spring training goes, right? I start with the AAA team basically because half the AAA teams in the big leagues, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew I was most likely going to start the season in A-ball, but that's where I started. So I'm running, we had to run a mile, and we had to run it under 7:30. And so I'm running with the whole AAA team, and how the minor league veterans can do. And so here's this new guy, and I'm the only guy from our draft class that's with this team. I think Mulder, who was the only other, he was in the big league. He was in big league camp, right? So I'm the only guy draft class. I'm with the AAA team. We're running the mile. I lap every one of them. I run a 5-minute flat mile.
Oh, you would have copped it, right? For taking off. Leaving the herd. Yeah.
Bro, they're like, dude, Forrest Gump, slow the fuck down. You're making us look bad.
Trying to make a team.
On and on. And so finally, I'm just like, whatever. Kept my head down, kept doing my thing. Then we're doing outfield drills, and they're hitting balls in the outfield. And I go full send, lay out, ball in the gap, boom, catch it, come up. Everyone's like, dude, take it easy, man. You're making it. And it's just like, you know, at this point, it's funny because then I was in A-ball, then I was in AA, then I was in AAA, and then I was getting called to big leagues. And the same dudes that were giving me all that shit in spring training were basically the same guys I was in AAA with. And Bob Guerin was my AAA manager. And the one thing that Bob told me when he called me up to tell me that I was going to Cleveland to play against the Indians the next day, he goes, "Hey man, just do me one favor. Don't ever fucking change. Ever."
Awesome.
And
that's awesome.
It's that hit home because I knew when you're able to put your blinders on, there's always going to be people that talk shit. And so there's always going to be, you're going to have your detractors no matter what. And so if you do it, whether you have success or whether you fail, do it your way.
Gotcha.
Learn from other people, bring in everything, try to learn, try to grow, try to have whatever, but you got to learn your way. Like you got to do it your way, because when it's all said and done, when it's all over, whether it's broadcasting or parenting or, you know, just life in general, you want to know that you gave it everything you had your way.
Byrnes, you know, it's funny, man, see, there's a skill to separate from the herd. Like you're talking about that 7.5 minute mile, man. I was the same dude. I would take off because I'd come out of an off season where I've worked my ass off. I want to impress and the whole thing. I'd take off, but the skill is you're just like, hey, I'm just going to keep running. I'm just going to keep lapping you. For me, it was like, oh, look at this douche trying to make a club, especially your first year in big league camp, the whole thing. So I'd slide right back into that group. You know what I mean? And that's something, because I remember you and I saw each other in New York at MLB Network last year, about a year ago or so. And one thing, I'll never forget it. You said to me, it's the same thing, dude. I got into broadcasting and I was a little insecure about the fact that I didn't play 20 years, wasn't a superstar, the whole thing. And one thing I tried to cover up was the Australian accent, because I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted to sound super pro. And you said to me, what's the one thing that separates you? And I said, you said you've got an Australian accent. And it's so funny, dude, because like I fall into that trap where I get on TV and it's like you have to try and sound super pro, but the minute I just break away from that, and if I can, get the balls to do it, man, it just changes. Everyone seems to be drawn to that. So it's funny, man. Like, but that's something you do that it may piss people off too. People on Twitter like, oh yeah, Byrnesy, can't, because they're sitting there wishing they could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so those guys are going to be there anyway. So here's the thing, when you, and this is what I told you with your accent, man. Like, I told Cliff Floyd the same shit too. I'm like, dude, don't try to be Mr. Broadcaster, man. I'm like, go out. Dude, Cliff's an unbelievable broadcaster. He's been in the freaking broadcasting game just about as long as I have. Like, but when Cliff is at his absolute best, when he's talking to me like him and I are at dinner, you're going to be at your absolute best when you're bullshit with me like we're doing this podcast right now. Like that's when your content is going to be reflective on the person that you're trying to be. Now, the good thing is, and you have to remember this, we live in a day and age where authenticity reigns supreme.
Right. 15
years ago, that wasn't the case at all. It was like, if you were the broadcaster, you had to be proper and you had to. Yeah. It's like, no. Like now when we see that shit, we're like, get that off. I don't want to see that. Like it doesn't resonate with anybody. So, and then the last thing is, I'll tell you, you can't be scared for a dead. You can't be scared. Like I love my job, but if it's for some reason they say, hey, dude, you're done. Yeah. Right. I loved baseball, but at some point when it was done, you can't live your life afraid. And so the only times that I've gotten in any broadcasting traps, in my opinion, are when I literally was speaking and thinking about what this TV executive was thinking about what I was saying, and then shit start and I'm like, dude, you know what? If I actually, I'm not going to get specific about it, but I basically had a conversation really early on in my broadcasting career, and with a high-powered executive in the TV industry, and I told him, I'm like, look, I said, I can't do this anymore, like unless you let me, like, unless I can be me, unless I can be authentic, like, I don't want to do this, like, and you're not going to want me to do this. And so if I'm able to have these, like, reins to an extent, like, I understand that there's certain things we can't cross, and there's certain lines we got to be, they're blurred, but for the most part, I need to be able to not have to think about what somebody else is thinking about what I'm saying.
Right.
It's not fun for me. It's not good TV for you. And so it was almost like this understanding that we had. It was like, okay, cool. You know what? Go gunsling it. But
I think too, Byrnes, I think you have enough, obviously, intuition to understand that you can do it in a respectful way. You're smart enough to know that, obviously people have jobs, like, people who are working around. If they say you've got 30 seconds to talk about something, you're not going to go for a minute and a half and just do a cartwheel in the middle of the studio because you get it. But it's just so funny, man. I think just from a personal level, like, and a lot of people get trapped in this. It's just everyone's kind of copying each other. So all of a sudden you sort of fall into this is how it's supposed to be done. But it's interesting you mentioned as well, a boss or someone like an authority figure, right? Is this something, I mean, you obviously had this kind of energy when you were a kid. You must have had teachers, coaches, hey, calm down, stop acting like this. This is how you're supposed to act, right? I mean, this didn't just come when you turned 30.
No. Yeah, you're right. It was tough because I got kicked out of class all the time. And, for the most part, I think teachers were pretty understanding, but, obviously I grew up full blown ADHD. It was really, when I was young, it was really hard to get me to sit still. I mean, obviously, I'm 44. I'm jumping around the freaking room. I just think that, maybe this goes back to, the thing that my parents taught me just about always being kind. I was never disrespectful, right?
Yeah,
so I never did anything, made it personal towards the teachers or any other kids or anything else like that. So pretty much I was being me, and at a young age that was really hard. Because I did get that calm down a lot, but I think for the most part, the more time that I get to spend around people, the more they are able to understand me, and the more I'm able to understand them. And then you sort of find your boundaries and you find your place. So it's not always easy. But at the same time, it's just, I think we're constantly trying to adapt, because as ADHD as I was, I also had that ability to hyper focus too, and lock in on something. And that's the whole reason why I'm able to do TV, right? Like, it's like, if I can get here and stay locked in, it can be good.
Were you as a kid, were you on like medication? Were they giving you all that?
Nothing.
No? Never.
Dude, they prescribed me coffee. So this is, I'll transition this a little. Basically, this is how we started the Let Them Play Foundation.
Well, that's what I was getting. I wanted, because I've been reading up about some of the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Because what happened, dude, Ryan? They've taken the everyday PE out of 97% of schools in the United States of America. So we're talking 60% of kids do zero after-school youth activity. The numbers are just astonishing. The 7 to 9 hours a day that people are spending on screens, which I imagine has only gone up. Now, that said, I've also seen some kids getting outside, I feel like, a little bit more through all this. But the biggest thing is that PE is an outlet for kids like me to basically stimulate our brains. So when we come back and we sit here and do a podcast, like, boom, dude, I got 20 miles on the treadmill earlier today, so I'm going to be dialed in with you, right?
Gotcha.
So it's just,
but it's really when you don't give kids the rightful opportunity to physical education and to after school youth activities, it's like, dude, we're suppressing them, not just physically, but more importantly, we're suppressing them mentally. And that's why you see the mental disorders have skyrocketed as well. Now, you could say, hey, maybe we're diagnosing them a lot more aggressively. I don't know about that. I do know this. I take my kids and I literally every single day I make them run a mile. I'm like before your day starts, you're running a mile. This is what we're doing. And when you see where they are before that mile and where they are after that mile,
yeah, for sure.
It's night and day. And it's funny because it's not this crazy amount of activity that we need. 20 minutes of moderate activity will stimulate the brain and the entire frontal lobe, which will allow these kids to concentrate, learn, and be more efficient and effective throughout the course of the entire day.
You know what's funny about that? So, Trent and I, we do camps with our business back in Australia, Next Gen Baseball. I always ask during stretch, and we try and get the energy through the roof, right? And, obviously 2020 is a lot different to when we grew up. Look, I played some video games like Tony La Russa baseball, whatever, but nothing like what you see on the screen now. There's the stimulation. I feel like what I do. So around stretch time, they're stretching, and I'm like, oh, so who here plays video games? A couple of kids put their hands up. Oh, what is it, Fortnite? That's the big one. Like, yeah, I play Fortnite. That's what I'm doing after this. It's amazing, dude. Like when you see a group of you got a group of 10 or 20, those couple kids, just the attention span. I'm like, I can't compete with that screen. I got no shot against that screen. It's crazy.
Crazy. So here's another one for you. So I have a friend, undisclosed friend, that works for Snapchat, and she's telling me, they have a super young demographic, right? So it's they're 10, they're 10 to 18-year-olds or whatever it is. They're opening the app 30 times a day, like nuts, that it's just, all day, every day. And she joked, kind of half jokingly, is like, she's like, sometimes I feel like I'm feeding these kids crack. Yeah. Like really, because that's what it's addictive, right?
And it is, yeah.
We've all been, dude. I used to play Tecmo Bowl. I used to play RBI baseball.
Me too.
Dude, I'd sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours, and I loved it. And I think part of it is fine, but like when it gets over the top, and especially with the games like Fortnite and other things, and the ongoing violence, which they've basically now proven that it desensitizes people to all of it, right? And so when you can get immersed into that. It's like, show me how you do anything, and I'll show you how you do everything. And then my mom used to say, show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are. Spend enough time with somebody. Spend enough time doing something. You're going to become completely inundated in what that is that you do. Your actions every single day are telling me who you are as a person. So that's where the argument for the video game is like, no, like enough's enough.
Yeah, no, and look, we I don't want to say this publicly, people are going to roll their eyes, but we do like a no screen with our kids, just because and nothing against, man. If you're 3-year-olds watching TV or whatever, no problem whatsoever. But dude, like, I feel like the show's now so different to like the cutaways and the coloring and stuff. They're built just like, and look, I'm guilty of it. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but those things, they're built to the way the little thing, circles on the screen to keep you on. Now, look, I want to just a little transition here. So, you're talking about you've been this way, your energy level through the roof, and it's something that you can't teach that, right? Now, you called me, I think it was a couple years ago, you called me and said, hey, can I get a hold of Ichiro, right, to help you out to raise some money? And I'm like, okay, first of all, man, like Ichiro, like, I don't know if he's going to respond to me. I'm going to throw your name like within 2 seconds to make sure he knows I'm serious. But then you said to me, yeah, I'm doing a triathlon across the country. And I nearly threw up. I nearly swerved off the road. I was like, dude, like, he can't be serious, man. And one of the things, thinking about this and just looking up some stuff last night on you and everything you're talking about, running, for example, dude, it is, for me, it is so boring. Like, I want to be able to run. I'd love to be able to run distance, do a marathon one day or something like that. I just can't and I'm not, off the wall or anything like that, but I just cannot stay locked in. And it's just basically my mind saying, dude, just finish this. I need to have something else. Do you feel like it's the reverse for you in a sense, because you are so, you're obviously you got energy through the roof. Is this something when you were out there running and, you've done ultra marathons and everything else, it's hard for someone like me to understand it when you're halfway through one of these, runs where you're running all friggin' day. Was that, is it for you, like, what got you into having the ability to do that?
Well, I think, for me, first of all, I think one of the things is that it's very meditative and it's very therapeutic. And it's one of the only times in my life where I'm able to shut off my brain and I'm able to go to a deep place. And just the other thing is that I feel like a lot of my best work is done when I'm active and just within my mind. And so these thoughts and ideas, I write this thing called the Daily Hustle. It's, it's a blog that I basically send out, a blog and podcast every day that I do.
I get it every day. Yeah.
I love it. So like these things don't end. Right. And so in part of it was when I wrote the book, it's called The Effort List, Life Lessons from a Human Crash Test Dummy. I championed the book as a lifestyle. And I'm like, it's a mentality, it's a lifestyle. And it's like, well, you know what? How can I hand someone this 500-page book of stories and life lessons and all this shit I've learned and I tell them it's a lifestyle, yet I'm not doing anything to help support the lifestyle. And so in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I want to do something and give them something to support it. And that's where the blog started. And so every single day, I got to come up with new shit. And a lot of that is contrived in my mind when I'm running, when I'm cycling, when I'm swimming, when I check out. And it's amazing how well my brain works when I'm at that point. And so now it's gotten to, because it's obviously not a natural transition going from baseball to endurance sports. And the other thing is when I first got into it, I mean, I was such a rookie and I had no idea what I was doing. And I was so uncomfortable and I was so scared and I thought I was going to die in the water. I literally had several near drowning experiences because I didn't really know how to swim other than limited time that I had surfing when as a kid growing up, but I was attached to a board. And so as I got into doing, Ironmans and, eventually this triathlon across the country and all the 100-mile races and everything, it was like everything that I did in that world was new to me, was exciting to me. And it's like, if we don't have that carrot, if we don't have that's something new, that's something that we're chasing, then what do we have? Yeah. Right. For sure. Like it's that's how it went from a sprint triathlon to doing all this other stuff, because I think the biggest thing is that I wasn't afraid ever, and I haven't been, to become vulnerable. I wasn't afraid to fail. And there was a lot of failure that went on in that transition, but ultimately it's given me an entire new I won't say meaning of existence, it sounds so strong, but I've been able to reach an entire new world, and I've been able to reach an entire new level, I think, of awareness of who I am as a person, going through all this stuff.
You ever okay, first of all, I want to mention one thing. Those ocean swims, man, I grew up on the beach. Swimming in the ocean is scary compared to swimming, especially with cold water too. I remember when you took off, you like jumped off the bridge or something. I'm like, I kept looking at the map, dude. When you were doing the triathlon across the country, I kept looking at the map going, okay, how does this work? I mean, but those ocean swims are no joke, dude. You can be in a pool all day, and then you get out in the ocean, it's completely different. But it's one of these things too, and you talked about that. Do you feel like it's transitioned through every other phase of your life? Once you get done with 100, one of these 100-mile, events or something like that, do you feel like it's completely changed every other aspect of your life, right?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's kind of let me know that, there are no limits like to what's possible. And, you know, before it's like, I remember hearing about Brian Morrison, this guy that did the Western States 100. And I was still playing at the time. I think it was like 2006. And he went like 99 point something miles, and he gets to the track in Auburn, collapses like 4 or 5 times around the track, gets some help. They pull him up, and he comes in, he wins the race by like 20 minutes, and then they disqualify him because they said he had assistance by lifting him up.
Yeah.
In that last thing. And I remember thinking back then, it was pretty well documented in the in this Diamond of the Rough, which was a documentary that was done about my experience doing the Western States 100. But basically, I couldn't comprehend what that was. I'm like, oh, dude went 100 miles, picked up around the track. Like, that didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I can't envision somebody running 100 miles. So when I talk to people about running 100 miles or doing an Ironman triathlon or the tri across the country, like, I talk to people in the baseball world about this shit. They can't. Most of them can't comprehend it, and I don't expect them to, right? But this is one thing I did last week, Ryan. So I told, and I did this to, basically I threw it out of the blog, right, on the Daily Hustle blog and podcast, and then I posted about it. I'm like, look, I said, here's the thing. We all have limits, and we all preconceived numbers, whether it's in the United States loves doing this to us, right? Or even just the running world, the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, the marathon. Yeah. And those are the preordained distances. And these are the holy grail. And so a few weeks ago, I ran 44 miles for my 44th birthday. And there was a guy that had run one half marathon in his life, and he had not run more than 5 miles in like 5 years. And he's like, hey man, he's like, you mind if I join you on the run? And I was down in Arizona, coached this baseball team with my kid, and his kid's on the team. Right. Like, dude, yeah, of course, come for, you know. I said, how many miles you want to run? He goes, oh, you know, maybe I'm sick at 5. And I'm like, dude, come on. I said, what's the longest you've ever gone? He's like, 13.1. I said, cool, we'll go 14. And he's
see, that's intimidating, dude. Straight away, he gets his feeling like, dude, here's my limit. This is what I'm this is my my prescription right here. Is this is what I have to.
You thought that was it? Yeah. You know what he fucking did? He did 16. 16 miles. He was hurting, right? And it's just, the funny thing is, like, no one knows what they're capable of doing until you push the boundaries, until you're willing to become uncomfortable to get out there and do it.
In that 16 miles, now obviously he's running next to you, right? But that's how many times was he like, yeah, I'm done. Or did he just keep going, plowing ahead?
He got to 13 and he was toast. Like, we could tell. Yeah. And
what'd you say to him?
We wanted to take him to the 14 because my boy Kowalski was with me. He does a lot of this crazy stuff, and so Kowalski and I were trying to. RTL is his name. So we were trying to get RTL, a South African dude. We were trying to get RTL to we're gonna get you to 14, dude. We're getting you to 14. Come on, he's all right. You know, nice and easy, light, smooth, fast. Give him all the keys. Relax the arms, everything. Going through all the form and the technique, and so we get him to 14. And then once we got him to 14, we realized, we're like, dude,
yeah,
we got 2 more miles to go this way. And then there's the Starbucks there. And so we kept telling, we're like, dude, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. So we took him. We got him to 14, and then we took him to 16. And basically, he was done at 16. Then that night, we're at the stadium, right? So I'm coaching. I'm down on the field. And I see him walking like this.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you realize?
But that's the best feeling ever. I mean, I don't care how sore his legs are. Like, if that's me, dude, I don't think I've ever ran 16 miles. If I'm doing that, I'm buzzing for weeks after that. Yeah. You know what I mean? The hard thing is, though, and this is something you do, and this is something I'm speaking for the majority here, is staying consistent. There's got to be days. Now, you do a daily hustle. You are putting content out every single day. Your consistency level's through the roof, right? There's got to be days there where I don't know, maybe not. You wake up, you're like, I just cannot be bothered doing anything right now. Like, I'm just lazy. I'm being lazy right now. Or are you just so far beyond that? This has gone way down the track where that never happens. Because I wake, dude, especially during this whole, this isolation thing, and I'm bummed out that I'm not doing games. My motivation's like sunken, right? There's got to be those times, surely, right?
Yeah, you know what? You know what's funny is that I'm not saying this to try to be a fucking go hard or anything. Like, yeah. To be totally honest with you, like I just don't have those days, and I say that because my days when I'm awake, if I'm not active, if I'm not doing something, it's like it's funny because I get to Saturdays and Sundays, when the world was back normal, right? And so whether it's like, documenting some of the shit that I do on Instagram story time or whether it's writing a daily hustle that day or not. And it's just like, there are some days that I do just want to go run and check out and put on music.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Those are those days. The most other days, like, I'm like, dude, I'm going to get on the treadmill and I'm going to freaking hike for, the first 5-10 miles, crank this thing up to, 4.5, 5. And so I would get the heart rate to a point where my brain's working and I do everything on my phone. So it's like, da, 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 da. And I knock out like 2 or 3 daily hustles at a time.
Gotcha.
So, that's, but the funny thing is, it's like, I was doing it the other day and I part of me was like, well, dude, are you working? And I'm like, no, this isn't work for me. Like, gotcha. I love this. Like, I enjoy this. Like this, I was excited to get on there, to get on the treadmill, to get going and to come up with some of this stuff and come up with these ideas and then develop the ideas. And it's not, here's the thing. The big difference is between whether you're consistent or not consistent and everything that you do in life is that you've got to make it a lifestyle. And if you make it a lifestyle, it's just not a question what you're going to do when you get up in the morning. It's like, hey, man, this is part of the routine. I'm going to get on my foot reflexology board. I'm going to go put my feet in the snow after that. Then I'm going to hop on the treadmill or the bike. I might go get a swim and I'm going to wake up. The kids wake up. I make sure when they're getting up every day too, that I'm there when they're getting up
gotcha.
and have breakfast with them. And then it's back to doing whatever I was doing. But it's like you want to make it a lifestyle as opposed to this is something that you have to do. Yeah,
100% for sure. So your routine. So, I mean, that was my next thing. How do you fit all this in, man? I mean, because you've got obviously your foundation, your broadcasting, which takes a ton of time. You got to run. I mean, it's running the lengths you're running or working out, whatever. That's not a 15-minute, a 7-minute ab workout, dude. What time are you waking up in the morning and getting this stuff done? What time are you going to bed?
So usually I'll get up between 4 and 5.
Gotcha.
And the first thing I'll do is get on the foot reflexology board. And then as the coffee's brewing, I go coffee and butter with a little MCT oil to kick it off. And then I do my daily calm meditation. It takes 10 minutes, light a fire. And then it's down to either the treadmill or the bike. And I'll typically start by hiking and going through all of my, the daily stoic, daily devotional, daily dad thing that I read every day, the daily hustle that I'll listen, because I try to get about 2-3 weeks ahead on all the daily hustles.
Yeah.
So a lot of them that like, all right. And I actually kind of like it because then when I get to read it, like a lot of times I forgot what I wrote.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Right. And so then I get to read it and now it resonates with me. And I'm like, okay, it hits home a little bit. And then from there, it's whether I'm going to listen to a podcast or an audiobook or whatever. And that's when I'll start cranking up the exercise and knocking off the miles. Is you give me a good audiobook and it's just gone. And then that's the other thing. Like, look, if you're not reading, you're like, dude, what are you doing? Right? You gotta read. You gotta continue to digest content, to continue to all sorts of things. And especially like, I'm just a huge history guy. Right. But being able to dive into a lot of this stuff it's just that's where the content is. I mean, I get all my content from reading it. And you know, what's fun is that, you know, the more you read, I think the more you formulate, you know, your opinions. But at the same time, the more, you know, for me, it's been the more I've been able to objectively step back and analyze situations, not only of the past and in history, but also like things that have happened in my life. And then, you know, trying to understand, I think the greatest thing we can do as human beings is try to understand where other people are coming from. Right. I mean, all world problems are basically because we become subjective assholes and we don't want to listen to anybody.
Dude, I agree with that, man. I mean, I just watched this documentary on Netflix, World War II in color. And you're looking back on the shit these people had to deal with back then. What are we complaining about? Obviously, this is pre-COVID-19. I mean, we've got some issues. But I'm looking and going, what are we complaining about? Look at what these people had to. Oh, yeah, 100%. I'm with you as far as that, for sure. 100%.
Yeah, it's nuts, dude.
Dude, well, look, man, you've inspired me. I've got to ask you this: what time do you go to bed at night, though, to fit all this in? This is a hefty schedule, man.
Yeah, so 10 o'clock. Like,
wow,
I'll
how do you shut off, man? I mean, that's the one thing with me. I'll go to sleep at 10. I'm exhausted, but I just can't shut off. My head just can't shut off, or I'm getting addicted to this thing, you know, or whatever.
So you did a couple things. Number one, if you can, you want the phone as far away as possible. The blue light kills you, right?
For sure.
So that'll keep you up. So you want to try to get the screens off. The other thing is the sleep stories on the Daily Calm meditation app, like, have really helped me. You know, and then the other thing is consistency too. So now I've noticed, like, being in one place, and, you know, we're up in Lake Tahoe and going through this, like, it makes it a lot easier, because in New York, when I'm working, a lot of times I understand, like, I'll work till midnight, right?
Yeah.
1 a.m. Like, I'm not eating dinner till 1 or 2. So I typically try to stay on West Coast time. But yeah, so now I got a pretty good routine where it's, hey, I'm in bed by 10. And ideally asleep by 11, and then, you know, up by 4 or 5. So I've also noticed that, and we're all different. I think a lot of this has to do with genetics, but, you know, I'll operate a lot better on 5 to 7 hours of sleep than I will if you give me like 7:30. Like,
gotcha.
It's like I'll wake up as groggy as could be, and it'll affect me the rest of the day. So I have no problem. I've become okay with understanding that, hey, look, this is how my body optimally operates, is off of this 5 to absolute no more than 7. So what I try to do is lay down for that at least 6-hour period.
Yeah.
Right. And then I know if I can do that, I can get my 5 in.
Yeah. I mean, I've been reading about that too, with sleeps, like 90-minute cycles, and some people respond better to that amount of sleep as opposed to needing, you know, whatever the I don't know, what is it, 8 hours or whatever it is recommended.
Bro, let me tell you something, because I've had a lot of arguments, but I've also tried to take this objective point of view, and I've done a lot of crazy shit in my day too, right? Stuff that goes overnight, like the endurance stuff. When we did the world record, when I broke the world record for most golf holes played in a 24-hour period, it was actually an Australian, not shockingly, that held that record, a guy by the name of Ian Colston. The record stood for 47 years. And part of that, my training for that, was going to be, look, I was going to have to be up for 24 hours, obviously, but I wanted to be up and efficient for those 24 hours. So I actually went through a number of days where I got used to staying up for that time period. Now, one of the things that I've learned, and I actually learned this before I did an Ironman in New York, but basically I slept 1 hour before I did this Ironman, right? And I went out and had a great race. And it was like, how is that possible? Well, the thing is this. What we really need, the amount of time of sleep we really need to optimally perform the next day. You ready for this?
Let's hear it. I'm writing this down.
It's 2 hours. It's
Wow.
2 hours. So I'm not saying not to get 7, not
Absolutely,
to get whatever fits for you. But when people say I can function or can't function, whatever. Now this shit will catch up to you. You can't do 2 hours every night. But there's a reason why, like before Western States 100 here, I remember, dude, I was lucky if I slept 2 hours before, went out and had a great race. So your body, the most important hours of sleep are your first 2. So if there's nothing else, so even if you go through, you sleep for 2 hours, you wake up and you're beating yourself up, you're like, oh. Dude, we mentally mind fuck ourselves after this, right? I can't go to sleep. So when I put my head on the pillow and I sleep solid for 2 hours, then I wake up, and if I have problems going back to sleep, I'm like, yeah, screw it. I got my 2 hours and I'm good. And then the other thing is, when you stop trying to go to sleep is when you go to sleep, right?
Yeah, right.
So whenever you sit there wrestling, you're like, I'm trying to go to sleep. That's the worst thing you can do is try to go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, and just, I need to ask you this one more time, dude. So you went when you were training for the golf, right? Most holes in 24 hours. You went no sleep, straight 24 hours. There's pain in that. There's physical pain in that. There's physical pain when you're doing this triathlon across the country. Isn't that enough? Like for the normal people like me, isn't that enough pain to say to your brain that says, I'm shutting this down? Like surely there has to be times where you get like that.
Yeah, there was the thing. What was so difficult about the triathlon across the country is I was doing 100 to 150 of miles on a bike every day for 24 straight days, and that was from Oakland to Chicago, right? And then the running, basically it was averaging 30 plus miles a day for a month straight.
Yeah. And
so the ability to be able to bounce back after that was incredibly difficult. Yeah, and it was a mental grind. But the one thing that I noticed every single day was that once we got moving, like it's a start that stops us every single time. But once I got moving, it was like the blood's flowing and the constant. Yeah. It was funny because people were like, how did you physically make it through by doing this? Our bodies respond and are capable of so much more. But if you think about what recovery is movement and blood flow and energy. And it's like when we go ahead and say, go run 30 miles, and then we sit down on the couch for 2 days, what do you think is going to happen? You just tore down all your muscles and tendons and ligaments. Your blood's going to rush down there. It becomes stagnant. It becomes inflamed. And then we're all screwed. But guess what? When you get up and run 30 miles the next day, more blood flowing, right? So that's how that worked. And then as far as the golf thing, during that round is really cool because we raised a ton of money for the Let Them Play Foundation. But we handed out it was like $50,000, $60,000 in grants to teams that came out and ran around with us. So basically I'm playing around, right? I think it was almost 24 rounds, 23 and a half rounds. So I got to the middle rounds in the middle of the day, which was the most difficult part, really. But you get to those rounds, I had like the Half Moon Bay football team, the Half Moon Bay cheerleading squad running with me, and they had to earn their grants. Gotcha. And the rounds were about 4.5, 5 miles per round, but they would run. And so I was able to feed off the energy of them.
Gotcha.
And that's what life is. Life's energy, and it's flow, and you got to be able to keep up with it, and you got to figure out, different ways to find your motivation. And, that was a big one for me during the golf.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely feeding off this energy, dude. I'm peeling myself off this bed at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. See how I go. See how many days I can push through.
Try doing this. Whatever it is, this is good for everyone at home too. So basically, we don't want to try to reinvent the wheel in one day. But what you do, if you normally get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, get up at 7. If you normally get up at 7, get up at 6. Gotcha. Take 1 hour, and do it for a week. Yeah,
cold straight. Turkey will crush you, right? Straight, just boom.
Don't. If you get up at 7, and all of a sudden you try to get up at 4, and it's just it's gonna throw everything off. Yeah. So, and then do it for a week straight, and pretty soon you're gonna start noticing you're gonna go to bed just about an hour earlier, and start setting up. Because right now, never more than any other time in our lives are we able to settle into a routine. So this is and then make these things part of your routine, whatever it is. Like when you're getting up in the morning, it's like this a process of getting shit done. And I think, I'm a firm believer that within the first hour you need to get moving. So don't sit around and just drink coffee for 2 hours. Like I'm all about the coffee, but within that first hour, you got to get going.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Burnsy, mate, this has been a blast, dude. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. I've written notes, dude. Tomorrow I'm going to start slowly chipping away at that routine. I appreciate it, Burnsy. Thanks, mate. That was awesome.
Dude, Ryan, the best, man. Hopefully we'll do this again, bro.